Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the Kevin Michael Grace Show. So I see that actor Terry Crews, despite being a black man, and a very black man, is now in trouble with the BLM movement, with the cancel culture, because he is speaking out against black supremacy. This is a story from the Daily Mail. Actor Terry Crews says Black Lives Matter shouldn't morph into Black Lives Better, and that any child of God is his brother and sister as anti-racism protests continue across the U.S. The America's Got Talent host made reference to the BLM movement in a tweet on Tuesday. Crews' tweet prompted backlash online from some who accused him of detracting from the movement. He also faced retaliation earlier this month when he weighed in on the BLM movement and said it could result in black supremacy. After facing immediate backlash, Crews responded in a series of tweets saying it was important not to suffer from groupthink. And so it's typical in stories like these that, apparently what Terry Crews had to say was greeted with widespread outrage. So what the reporter does is he types in Terry Crews in Twitter in the little box up there on the right, and there's your outrage. Let's see. You could have left out that last sentence. No one wants to be better. We want to be treated fairly and equal. Writer Kelly, with 3 E's, Nicole Terrell, tweeted, "You truly are worthless to us. White people can have you, especially since you love doing their work for them." I'm looking forward to black-only television movies. Hollywood, actually. Again, let's see how the ratings work out. Let's see what the box office is, if we ever get a box office again. Defeating white supremacy without white people creates black supremacy. Equality is the truth. Like it or not, we're all in this together, Crews had tweeted. Very controversial. Very, very controversial. He continued, "Please know that everything I've said comes from a spirit of love and reconciliation." That's not really what we're seeing on the streets of America, is it? Love and reconciliation. For the black community first and the world as a whole, in hopes to see a better future for black people. I believe it is important we not suffer from groupthink and we keep minds of our own and be allowed to ask difficult questions to each other. I believe this dialogue is important as we get through this trauma together. I love you. Someone calling, I don't want to misgender this person, I'll just say a person called Z or Zay Taylor, wrote, "No more of this, no more. I'm sick of black people always having to state the obvious. We're fighting for basic human rights, and we shouldn't feel obligated to get online and constantly waste energy stating that we want equality and not revenge. Please stop pushing this ideology." Well, obviously they don't want equality, because if they did, they would call for the immediate end of affirmative action, both official and unofficial. Holly Robinson Pete, who I believe is an actress who married a football player, correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, and then there's the angry face emoji. "We trying to matter and get to equal, and you are worried about better?" And then a stop sign and a shh emoji. Mindy Robinson, I don't know who she is, tweeted, "I was wondering why Terry Crews was being canceled in comments on Twitter, only to find out it was over a message about equality. Equality means equal, not better than. It's why I was so against believe all women, because it unfairly makes a woman's word worth more than a man." And we hear again from Z or Zay Taylor. Again, I don't want to misgender this person. "Well, a conservative white woman agrees with him. Thanks for proving that the statement was hot garbage." If we're talking about cancellations, it appears that all white women are being canceled. And again, from Kelly with 3 E's, Nicole Terrell, "You truly are worthless to us. It comes as Cruz revealed last week that his Brooklyn Nine-Nine sitcom had to toss out scripts written for season 8 as the series grappled with how to address protests and the BLM movement. The comedy series mostly focuses on the light-hearted side of policing. Now, I understand that Brooklyn Nine-Nine is in trouble because it's a cop show that does not, as the saying goes, reflect the feeling all cops are bastards or ACAP. Cruz explained our showrunner, Dan Gore, they had 4 episodes all ready to go, and they just threw them in the trash. We have to start over. We've had a lot of somber talks about it and deep conversations, and we hope through this we're going to make something that will be truly groundbreaking this year. It doesn't sound like there's going to be a lot of laughs, does it? Yeah. Yes. I suppose everything that's going to be produced from now on is all going to be about Black people and how Black people are the best and how Black people do all the work twice as much or 4 times. I have to work 4 times as hard just to get half the recognition that a white person would. It's going to be all very, very boring. Very, very boring. Earlier this month, Cruz again apologized to his fired America's Got Talent host Gabrielle Union after she filed a harassment complaint against NBC and claimed a network chairman tried to silence her reports of racism. I thought that her complaint was that Simon Cowell smoked on the set. The murder of George Floyd has forced me to search my heart to find out what more I can do as a human being and as a citizen, and more specifically as a Black man, to ensure our community can not only survive but thrive in this new world. Whites have always had privilege in a society that has systemic racism built in, a fact that has been proven over and over again with the senseless death of unarmed Black men and women, with no one being held accountable. But I also see that I am privileged as a man in a society that also has sexism built in. This privilege carries over into my community as a Black man in relationship with Black women. It is in this light I want to make further amends with Black women, and in particular, Gabrielle Union, for not recognizing the privilege I have, especially in the workplace, and adding this fact to my earlier apology. If we are to move forward as a people, we must do the work required to heal the relationships in our community first. To whom much is given, much is required. I have a huge responsibility, and I vow to honor it. Black society in the United States is already a matriarchy. What more do Black women want besides all the jobs, all the pay, all of the praise, with none of the responsibility? It's Black women. We talk about Black Lives Matter, but increasingly we're talking about Black women's lives. Now, McDonald's has been down with the Black people for years and years and years. They started a campaign to that end some years ago. Paul Kersey wrote at UNS, in 2010, McDonald's is the unofficial fast food restaurant of Black people. Nothing beats a Big Mac, fries, and Coke at the eating establishment that dubs itself 365 Black. Yep, that was their campaign. Nothing except maybe Popeye's chicken, but that's a story for another day. McDonald's has capitalized off the magnetic pull it exerts toward Black people who find the golden arches so appealing that they will stop at nothing to garner McNuggets. Wait, what exactly is 365 Black at McDonald's again? Quote, at McDonald's, we believe that African American culture and achievement should be celebrated 365 days a year, not just during Black History Month. That's the idea behind 365black.com. It's a place where you can learn more about education, employment, career advancement, and entrepreneurship opportunities, and meet real people whose lives have been touched by McDonald's. I'm assuming the lives have been touched by McDonald's. That they're not talking about morbid obesity and diabetes. Kersey says that he agrees completely and believes that the plan to go 365 black at McDonald's is being warmly embraced by the white community as well. Consider the actions of Melody Duchesne, a white woman in Toledo, who found the lack of McNuggets so horrifying that she lashed out at the drive-through window with terrible ferocity. She acted in a manner that many would classify as 365 black. A Toledo woman who allegedly put her fist through a McDonald's drive-through window after being told her order couldn't be filled appeared in court Saturday on a felony vandalism charge. This incident reminds us of two other moments we have discussed. Once, when a black woman dialed 911 over the inability of the McDonald's staff to bestow her McNuggets, and the infamous story out of Memphis where black men who happened to be dressed in drag descended upon the McDonald's employees like a pack of harpies after they were denied food at the drive-through window. Worse, but a few days after Ms. Duchesne's attempt to go 365 black at McDonald's, yet another black woman struck with a vengeance at the unofficial fast food restaurant of black people. This was at Kansas City. A McDonald's customer unhappy with her hamburger has taken out her rage on staff and has all been captured on video. Surveillance video from a Kansas City McDonald's restaurant clearly shows a woman demanding a refund for what she claimed was an inferior hamburger. After being denied the refund, she throws a bucket of water over the counter, along with other items, including a basket of straws, cookies, a sign, and even 3 of the cash registers. The incident played out in front of several unsuspecting customers, including children. The woman was gone before police arrived and has not been identified. There is a whole genre of videos on YouTube, which are often taken down for obvious reasons, which shows brawls at McDonald's with the black women tearing out their weaves and really getting into it. There's also tons of videos of angry black customers vaulting over the counter to attack the employees on the other side. In these videos, most of whom are black. Of course, there's also the Chuck E. Cheese videos, which are a comedy staple and have been for years, because, you know, if you're looking for a brawl, you definitely want to go to a children's restaurant, and you definitely want to bring your children with you so they can partake of the culture. Look, there's no question in my mind that what we're being sold right now is black supremacy, not least by McDonald's. I mentioned yesterday that their banner on Twitter, it leads with Trayvon Martin. He was the no limit N man who got limited by a white Hispanic called George Zimmerman. This later went to trial, and Zimmerman was found not guilty. Of course, then we have Michael Brown, the 292-pound gentle giant who attacked a police officer, tried to steal his gun. This was after stealing a $50 box of cigars and strong-arming the shopkeeper, which makes it robbery, a serious offense. And then he just walked off, and then he came back and charged the officer, and I believe it took 9 shots take him down. There was an exhaustive investigation of this, and despite a whole bunch of people lying to the police, the truth eventually came out. That didn't stop the officer, Darren Wilson, from being fired and having to flee Ferguson, Missouri. I thought I would read from some of the tweets published by McDonald's in the last couple of days. A thread of all the powerful voices you'll hear during tonight's BET Awards. McDonald's will be handing over their platform to amplify black voices. We're here for this ad. And what do we got here? We're partnering with local courts and the justice system. We're sending young men to us instead of the prison system. This is Gary Davis and LBA, who appears to run something called the Swag Shop. I employ everyone. Actually, that should be implore everyone to support black artists. We are the literal heartbeat of popular culture, but that needs to be reflected in position and pay. Black trans women have a very simple message: stop killing us. This is from Imara Jones. Keep in mind, these are all tweets from McDonald's. They're not retweets. These are original tweets with people that McDonald's has solicited. Imara Jones is described as a journalist and the head of something called Translash. I encourage kids to protest like me and use their voices to stop racism, because that's what you want to do. You want to bring your children, including what appears to be something like a 5-year-old, into a potential riot scene. Black storytelling is powerful, but how many of those stories do you see in video games? This is from Latoya Peterson and Glow Up Games. When I think of Black art, there is a certain texture of expression, says This Is Mark C. That statement makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I suppose it is, it just means Black people are awesome. Someone, Melissa R. Butler, who has a ring through her nose and very unusual earrings, and I would describe her as a plain-looking woman. The reality is we are beauty. We are the culture. I don't think it could be any clearer than that. Netta Dobbins, it's not about survival anymore. We're trying to thrive, and we're trying to create prosperity for generations beyond us. There's not enough anti-racist research figuring out what's wrong with racist policies, says Dr. Ibram. There's not enough anti-racist research? It seems to me that American universities now produce little else than that. Let's see. Imani Naomi says, magic happens when your goal is to build community. We are culture. That's the slogan. We are culture. Black people, Black women in particular, are culture. Kenny Burns says, we must protect, honor, love, and defend Black women at all costs. Actually, it's Black men overwhelmingly that are being shot down in the streets over trifles. But it seems that Black women believe that they are on the firing line. Oh, and there's a quotation that McDonald's and a video that they have solicited from Bubba Wallace, the hate hoaxer. You're not going to stop hearing about the Black driver for years. Is he going to be the sole NASCAR Black driver? Is he the Black driver? Can there be any others besides Bubba Wallace? Kwame Rose, support Black-led organizations, support Black people. Black Excel, ENCE. I don't know what that means. Again, with the Bubba Wallace. Oh, this one is a retweet. He had tweeted together. This was when all the other drivers were bullied into surrounding his car as a gesture of solidarity. And I stand with Bubba. And again with the Bubba, what number 43 said. Richard Petty Motorsports is not owned by Richard Petty. It's owned by a fellow who hired Nicki Minaj to play at his son's bar mitzvah. I wonder how much money it would cost to have Nicki Minaj play at a bar mitzvah. I don't think she comes cheap. Okay. 1970, I bet there will be flying cars in the future. 2020, McDonald's video chat backgrounds. Are they trolling us now? Are they seriously trolling us? Yes, we were promised flying cars, but what we got instead was Black supremacy. I'm reminded that after America put a man on the moon in 1969, and there were, of course, several manned lunar landings after that, there was considerable outrage amongst the Black leadership that this was a tremendous waste of money and the money should go to Black people instead. And it was shortly after that that NASA decided that its first priority was diversity. And we know what's happened to NASA after they quit The manned moon program, they send up rockets full of people that blow up. That's what's happened. There is a piece here from Variety, The Reckoning. Again, with the reckoning over representation. Black Hollywood speaks out, but is the industry listening? Former Glee star Amber Riley remembers the time earlier in her career when a producer told her that she and other actors of color were a little more disposable because that's the way the world is. Yeah, we don't know that a producer ever said that to her. I rather doubt it, frankly. As her professional trajectory continued, she witnessed her fair share of bad behavior and knew who would or would not be held accountable. Being told that the white girls are not fireable, who says that? Because white girls in television are fired all the time because they're too old, or they want a different look, or they're not getting along with the producers, or they're not sleeping with the producers. Riley said that she internalized that message to the point that she was distraught going into auditions in her post-Glee career, dealing with anxiety and a loss of confidence. I just felt like there's a million black actors that want this. There aren't a million black actors. There aren't even close to that. What is special about me? That's what feels like when nobody cares. They don't care that you're being abused on set, whether that's verbally or otherwise. They don't care. Well, I suspect that if Amber Riley were to have a conversation with any white actors or actresses, as we used to call them, she would find out that this paranoia is rampant amongst all actors. A feeling of self-loathing. No one is ever going to hire me again. Of course, this self-loathing goes hand in hand with a kind of deranged narcissism. That's what actors are like. Riley recalls all this in the wake of Glee actor Samantha Ware revealing that the show's star, Lea Michele, allegedly threatened in 2015 to shit in her wig. Yeah, okay. I'm sure Lea Michele said that because someone said that she said that. Riley's support of Ware on social media led to black actors with similar experiences reaching out and prompted her to create Unmutiny, a movement to end black silence in the entertainment industry. What is this silence? I keep hearing about this silence, and what is actually going on and what's been going on for years is a roar, not silence. Remember Oscars Too White? The year when Hollywood said, oh, geez, we're in trouble. Because apparently the black people are angry with us. So let's give the Best Picture award to a movie about black cowboys eating pudding or whatever it was. Sensitive teenage black homosexuals, a movie that was forgotten roughly 15 minutes after it was released. What many in the entertainment industry, Variety opines, is ready to say aloud is this: the institution itself is imbued with white supremacy and a patriarchal structure designed to proffer advantages unequally. Now the question is whether Hollywood, a town built on the very premise of exclusivity and gatekeeping, can make good on its commitment to inclusion and amplify the voices of black talent and other creatives of color the way it has purported to. I've mentioned this before, but I think it's significant. Till the 1960s, essentially, you did not see black people in Hollywood movies. And the reason was there was an assumption that white audiences did not want to see black people in movies. And I think that pretty much reflected the culture of the time. Now, apparently, we're just going to have more and more and more black people in movies talking about the horrific experience of being black. And again, I look forward to the ratings and or box office receipts for this. The more we hear about black culture, we are culture, they say, the more we understand that black culture is apparently talking about being black endlessly. And, oh, why isn't this black, or why isn't that black? And why is there no black superheroes, or, I don't know, Lego pieces or whatever? It's not something that has a very broad appeal, but Americans are going to get it good and hard. The industry has long evolved past films like The Birth of a Nation and Disney's Song of the South, and more women and people of color have come to occupy positions of power, both in front of and behind the camera. But that has not been enough to cancel out generations of hurt and exclusion. Too much is never enough. Black writers still can't get a shot to write their stories, says director Matthew A. Cherry, who won an Oscar this year for his animated short film, Hair Love. Yes, people are queuing up to find another expression of Black people's obsession with their hair and their strange belief that white people are obsessed with Black people's hair. Let's see, he continues, if you look at a big majority of studio films that have come out, be they biopics or stories with primarily Black characters, a lot of times you have white screenwriters who are able to tell those stories. This is tricky because a lot of times they'll say, okay, we want a big name writer on it, or we need to rely on the credits of said writer. It's just like a lose-lose situation because you can't get credits if you don't get opportunities. And the people who have been getting opportunities for the last 30, 40, 50 years haven't been us. Again, I suspect that if Matthew A. Cherry were to talk to his colleagues, he would find out that there are far more screenwriters than there are films or TV shows. And it is not uncommon for screenwriters to shop a script around and have it rejected and rejected and rejected, and then to find that story appear on the screen with someone else's name credited with writing it. This is childishness. It's just absolute childishness. Hollywood is insanely difficult to get a foothold in. There are many very, very talented people who have been broken by Hollywood. Oh, I don't know that they didn't get a part because the producer wanted to, hire someone that he was sleeping with, or hire his cousin, or something like that. But Hollywood is cruel, but apparently it's only cruel to Black people. Again, utter childishness. Peter Brimlow writes, here's what I tweeted about the latest Trump scandal. Trump retweets, then deletes video that includes protesters shouting white power. Results for Black Power in Google News, about 112,000 results. One example, opinion, when the protests are over, Black Power will be what matters. Keep in mind that Blacks are 13% of the population of the United States. This is by Ricky L. Jones in the Louisville Courier-Journal. Brimlow comments, why is it okay to say Black Power, but not white power? And John Derbyshire, also at VDare, has an interesting comment on the Karen phenomenon. He writes, it's very handy to have well-known phrases for social phenomena. A well-crafted phrase, clarify our thinking about a phenomenon, help us to see as what it truly is. A couple of the best such phrases to emerge in recent years are virtue signaling, except that we seem to be unable to agree on how to spell signaling, and narrative collapse. For readers who've just wakened from a Rip Van Winkle-style 20-year sleep, virtue signaling is a species of what used to be called cheap grace, where you raise your moral standing in your peer groups by cost-free speech or actions. Narrative collapse is what happens at that point in the news cycle when the gentle black giant or winsome black teenager who suffered some misfortune at the hands of a white person turns out to be a low-life thug with a drug habit and a rap sheet. Watching this week's clip of the lady in Seattle going into high hysterics after being confronted by a Black guy over some kind of trivial negative encounter, I'm thinking we need a phrase for this. It is, after all, looking to be a thing. The business of Amy Cooper and her dog in New York City's Central Park 4 weeks ago was very similar. Well, that was the episode that introduced the general public to the tag Karen, indicating a white woman asserting her white privilege. So perhaps the phrase we're seeking here is something like Karen abuse or Karen shaming. These two incidents, that one in New York and this one in Seattle, are, I would guess, the tip of a very big iceberg. I can recall from private conversations across many decades hearing stories from white women who have felt intimidated to the point of high nervousness, if not actually shrieking hysteria, by the behavior of Black men in a one-on-one encounter. In some of these episodes, as I've heard about them, the Black guy is not at fault in any way. An office colleague, a young white female New Yorker of properly liberal sensibilities, once confessed to me that if she was alone in an elevator and a large Black guy got in and the two of them rode a few floors together, she felt highly uncomfortable. What, I asked her, in a way you wouldn't feel if it was a small Asian guy? Yes, she admitted. She was obviously racked with guilt about what she had just confessed, just as obviously there is not necessarily any fault here on the part of the Black guy. You have to suspect, though, that Blacks know about this and that Black men of a certain temperament have malicious fun with it. With the advent of the smartphone and the ability to make video recordings and post them, the temptation to stage a Karen-shaming incident must, to a certain personality type, be irresistible. There's also the element of revenge. Black Americans are taught in our schools and colleges to be angry about slavery and Jim Crow. It's not surprising that some Blacks as adults are looking for revenge against whitey. What's surprising is that most Blacks aren't. White kids undergoing the same education are taught that they share responsibility somehow for all that cruelty and oppression, so a corresponding proportion of them arrive in adult life loaded with racial guilt. The guilt is mixed with fear, though. Most whites, by the time they arrive at adulthood, know the great unmentionable of social life in our country, that Blacks are, in the statistical generality, a whole other order of magnitude more violent and dangerous than other races. And there, with smartphone in hand, you have the ingredients for a perfect Karen shaming. Locate a Karen, get alone with her, pick a quarrel, all the while maintaining a cool, middle-class, non-ghetto demeanor, which is the merest slight seasoning of aggression. Press the quarrel to the point where her personality disintegrates. Force her to a virtue-signaling punchline, if possible. The Seattle lady started yelling that she has a Black husband, although whether she actually does or not, I haven't been able to ascertain. Then post the whole thing on social media. Hey, it's fun. With any luck, the Karen will be identified and fired from her job. That's the real prize, the cherry on the revenge cookie. Even if she doesn't get fired, though, you Karen shamed her, made her look like a hysterical nitwit, and best of all, a racist. To millions of viewers, how sweet it is. I think there's going to be a backlash to this, a very severe backlash. We hear over and over again that white women voted in the majority for Trump, and this is supposed to be absolutely shocking. Well, which of the two candidates, Trump or Biden, are the Karens going to think is on their side? Certainly not going to be Joe Biden. And in the privacy of the voting booth, you can be as outrageous as you like, and no one will know. And I think when the Beckys realize that the mob is out to get them, they will start acting in self-defense. Let's go to the chat. Tom Anderson says, KMG, what do you think about Jared Taylor, NPI Radix, and Stefan Molyneux getting banned from YouTube? I talked about that a little bit yesterday. A point was made by someone on my Twitter feed today that the numbers that Stefan Molyneux were getting were rivaling those of mainstream media productions. Two things. Despite the fact that many of these people are Black pillars, the mainstream media does not want any narratives out there which are not pro-Biden. And they're also looking to protect themselves from competition. And so they ban, and continue to ban. And I think it's quite possible that very soon, well, certainly if Biden wins the election, what we have known as social media will no longer exist anymore. It simply won't, because anyone who expresses a contrary opinion is going to be hunted down. And it may be that the last function that the police in America serve is to hunt down those people who aren't wearing masks. Coachalango says, I want to do an art project and pump the KMG show through a small speaker in a fake hornet's nest in some chic midtown bistro. Sounds like fun, but I accept no personal responsibility. Chad Chadson, hello, friends, he says. Well, hello, Chad. Thank you for your fine work as moderator. Walrus the Libertarian says, diabetes matters. Now, COVID-19, we know that it kills more males than females. So there's no sexism action going on there. But it is killing more people of color, well, particularly Black people. And there's an obvious reason for that, because COVID-19 is deadly to two groups of people only. Those people who are exceedingly old and those people who have morbidities, comorbidities, or several comorbidities. And among those, diabetes, heart disease, morbid obesity, etc. Halper says, it seems there will be a cop purge from TV like the rural purge of the early 70s, eliminate positive-ish portrayals of trad police. Yes, it's already happening. A&E canceled Live PD, I think it was called. That's the most popular show on cable, and they canceled it. The rural purge is very interesting. You had a bunch of shows, Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres. I'm trying to remember the man who made Beverly Hillbillies. I don't know whether it's still playing in reruns all over the place. And it was a very popular show for the better part of a decade. But it got canned by CBS because apparently, the kids didn't watch it. Yeah, Paul Henning created it. And the Beverly Hillbillies and shows like Green Acres and Petticoat Junction are not making fun of flyover people. Quite the reverse. The villain in the Beverly Hillbillies was the evil banker, Milburn Drysdale, who was always conniving to steal the Clampetts' money. And then we had young Jethro Bodine, who was constantly getting caught up in some ridiculous 60s fad, and he was just mocked relentlessly. I suspect that CBS realized that it had a whole bunch of shows that it was running which were objectively right-wing, and so they decided to put an end to that. And you see, how would I call it, gritty reality shows like All in the Family. They were what replaced it. We're going to start really shoving the paws down your throat. Some of the other shows canceled. Mayberry RFD, which was the follow-up show to the Andy Griffith Show. Mr. Ed Lassie, Hee Haw, which later went into syndication and was quite successful. But no, CBS decided that it was going to be relevant, and flyover people are not relevant. And even if they watch in large numbers, and even if they buy the products advertised, we don't want those people. Ugh. They're just not, there's just nothing cool about them at all. YT says, my black grocery delivery guy today was yelling on the phone about N-words and killing someone. Should I make a complaint? Do I risk getting my account canceled or a retaliation from said man? You might want to consider where you live. I'm going to talk about that with regard to St. Louis in a few minutes, and the so-called Ken and Karen, who are now in very serious trouble for having the audacity to protect themselves from a mob. Yeah, that's what it's come down to. Tom Anderson says, if that happened now, that's the gentle giant. Darren Wilson would probably have gotten the death penalty. Quachalango says, KMG, what's your go-to karaoke double shot? I have never participated in karaoke. Don from Beyond says, Trayvon happened in the next town over for me, Sanford, Florida. My sister lives there. She said Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton came to try and stir things up. Happily, they were unsuccessful. You can't write something crime in KMG's chat. Okay, or in any YouTube chat, says Octopus Knight. Tom Anderson, oh yes, the great luminary of our time, Ibrahim X. Kendi. I wonder what the X stands for. Certainly not, it used to be, you'd see someone with an X, and you knew it stood for Xavier. I suppose it's now an X in the Malcolm X style. Tom Wolfe related something that hilarious that happened in the 1960s, that Malcolm X, formerly Malcolm Little, had become famous, and he was on one of those shows, Meet the Press, Face the Nation, and they were calling him Malcolm, the questioners, and he responded with something like, don't be calling me Malcolm, I ain't your boy. And this rather irritated the reporters, so for the rest of the show, they insisted on addressing him as Mr. X. Danny Rose says, have you seen Portrait of Jenny, about a struggling painter in Depression era New York? No, I have not. I will check that up. Let's see. Octopus Knight, one of my neighbors just put up a BLM sign. I don't know if they're really supporters or it's just the proverbial lamb's blood across the lintel. Well, no, this is Havel's shopkeeper, right? That he puts up the sign in the window of his store. You know, the workers of the world will whatever, you know, because if he doesn't, he will be in trouble. Because it's not enough. You know, the old rule was silence means consent. We saw this with gay rights. No, silence is not sufficient. You have to wholeheartedly support it. And now the same is true of BLM. Halper says coronavirus is spread primarily by racism. We are going to hear that quite seriously soon enough. Will there be a BLM box on tax returns, says Quachulango. Okay. Danny Rose says, all we really know about BLM's philosophy is that the ends justify the means, two wrongs make a right, and the sins of the father shall be visited upon the sons. Yeah, that's pretty powerful philosophy. But the problem is that these people never seem to understand that that very thing could be turned against them. MLTMGTOW, why is nobody mass protesting this bogus lockdown, ruining the economy and people's lifestyles? Good economies reduce social tensions due to widespread opportunities. Well, that's true. I suppose I'll be talking about COVID-19 and the panic, which is ramped up, despite the fact that we learn every day, more and more, that it's not really a very dangerous disease. Mass protesting, well, you get yourself arrested. You know, you might even get yourself shot for this. The police have been thoroughly politicized. Justin Proto says, KMG, would you discuss Calhoun's discourse on government? I would have to reacquaint myself with it. It's been quite a few years since I read Calhoun. Walrus Libertarian says, it's kind of amazing how few journalists are on our side at all, and half of them are shills. Well, there's a reason for that now. You may have seen that Maggie Haberman, who has distinguished herself with her anti-Trump reporting, happened to say that she thought that Joe Biden was running that he was a flawed candidate running a flawed campaign, and the roof fell in on her. Obviously, Joe Biden is a flawed candidate. He's too old for a start. He was first elected in 1972. He spent decades in the Senate essentially doing nothing except showing off his hair transplants. And now he's senile. And it can't be hidden. People are comparing him to Hillary Clinton in 2016, who, of course, was famously thrown into the back of a van like a sack of potatoes. But Hillary was capable of, how would I say, energized, vivacious campaigning for several hours a day. And Joe Biden simply isn't. Simply isn't. Kevin, are you using Parlay? Says Metal Mike. Not yet. Not yet. I'm thinking it over. As I mentioned yesterday, see, I had a similar problem with Gab. Do I really want to write 2 messages where I only wrote 1? Because I spend too much time on social media as it is. Let's get back to it. Alyssa Milano. Conservatives responsible for cancel culture. We're going to be hearing this quite seriously soon. This is going to become a left-wing meme as she faces her own cancel mob for wearing cornrows and possibly blackface. Actress Alyssa Milano is blaming cancel culture on conservatives, arguing that the political right, not the left, is weaponizing cancel culture to take out critics of President Donald Trump. In reality, left-wing activists, this is David Eng writing in Breitbart, and their allies in the mainstream media pioneered cancel culture as a way of erasing right-of-center politicians and cultural figures, both living and dead. They have also tried repeatedly to cancel conservative news outlets like Breitbart News and Fox News through activist-driven advertiser boycotts. Alyssa Milano, who was a regular presence during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, who the left-wing mob tried and failed to cancel, tweeted Monday her baseless claim. Specifically, cancel culture is being weaponized by the right/Putin. This is insanity. This is absolute insanity. Oh, Russia took over the 2016 election and Trump's in his pocket. Where's the evidence? Oh, we have this thing called the PIS dossier. Oh, which was manufactured by Hillary Clinton's campaign. And it was so unimportant that when it came time for the House to impeach Trump, there was nothing about Russia in it. But Alyssa Milano continues, take notice of who they are targeting and what is trending. Are they trying to hurt Trump's most vocal critics? Yup. The misinformation campaign has begun. Be vigilant in what you post on social media. Truth still matters. Too funny. Leftists have canceled numerous influential conservative figures since Trump won the 2016 election. Prominent conservatives canceled by the left who have lost their jobs include Roseanne Barr, Megyn Kelly, Diamond and Silk, Google engineer James Damore. The left-wing cancel mobs came for Gavin McInnes, Stephen Molyneux, Laura Loomer, and Katie Hopkins, all conservatives who've been kicked off social media. Historical figures are also getting canceled as BLM activists vandalize and demand the removal of statues of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Ulysses S. Grant, and even Abraham Lincoln. Leftist activists are also calling for the cancellation of movies and TV shows that don't conform to their ideology. Titles including Cops and Live PD have all fallen victim to the cancel mob in recent weeks. It's not conservatives calling for the censoring of Gone with the Wind. Leftists are increasingly canceling their own in a quest to purge their side of forbidden thought. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling is currently fighting a cancel campaign after she questioned certain tenets of transgender dogma. Left-wing horror author, yes, left-wing, yes, and underage rape fantasist Stephen King. I was actually shown the passages from It with the underage gangbang. I could hardly believe it. Anyway, King joined other left-wing figures, actor Daniel Radcliffe, Eddie Redmayne, George Takei, and actor Rupert Grint in attacking Rowling. Left-wing cancel culture has hit the left-wing media hard. Senior editors at the New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, Variety, and Condé Nast Bon Appetit have fallen victim to cancel mobs. Milano's message comes as she faces her own cancel mob after an old photo of the actress sporting cornrows resurfaced on social media, prompting accusations of cultural appropriation. She is also facing claims that she once wore blackface in a photo. I'm looking at this picture of supposed to be cornrows. They look more like dreadlocks to me. Why any woman would think that was a good look, or any man would think that the cornrow was a good look. And then there's a picture of her in 2013, and only wearing blackface. I mean, perhaps not in a minstrel sense. I live in a very vibrant neighborhood, as you can tell from the ambient noise. I get this about 10, 15 times a day. But this is perhaps the most oppressive that it has ever been. Milano has denied that she was wearing blackface in the photo in question. Well, I don't know, if you put makeup on such that you resemble a Mexican peasant, perhaps, or an purely Native American warrior, like, why are you doing this? Maybe she was dressing up as something, but of course that's forbidden now. Melissa Milano said, the replies to this tweet are proving my point. Thank you. Okay, this has to do with cancel culture, but not to do with anything related to BLM. I just thought I would mention it recently. You may have seen this story. Former Mythbusters co-host Adam Savage's sister accuses him of repeatedly raping her when they were children. I watched Mythbusters. I thought it was an enjoyable program. Adam Savage, I know that he's a shitlib, relentlessly so. I rather like the other fellow who wore the beret and the mustache. I liked him better. What I want to bring up about this story is this supposedly happened in the late 1970s. Okay. So this was over 40 years ago. But the New York Child Victims Act allows victims to file cases that have already exceeded the statute of limitations. This supposedly happened when he was 9 years old, which makes me deeply suspicious in the first place. Let's see, it says the New York Child Victims Act allows victims to file lawsuits against abusers during a specified one-year look-back window, giving victims the opportunity to file cases that have already exceeded the statute of limitations. Look, the statute of limitations, it existed for a reason, which is there is no possible way that it could be proved that Adam Savage did anything untoward with his sister. It cannot be proved. This is going to be a he said, she said thing. Savage's reputation has already been destroyed by this. And I suppose he's a fairly wealthy man, and his sister is going after his money. It seems to me to be, obviously, when you're talking about sexual crimes committed against minors, different standards have to apply. But I think that it would be, what would be just is we look at, say, the age of 18, which is the age of a majority now. You have 5 years to make a claim. After that, that's it. You do not have any right to make a claim. Increasingly, men are being convicted of rape, or what is now called sexual abuse, because the term rape has fallen out of favor. Just on the he said, she said basis. And I'm no fan of Harvey Weinstein, quite the reverse. But this verdict was very troubling indeed. Very troubling indeed. And no less than Joe Biden has said that in sexual cases, the presumption of innocence will be removed if he becomes president. There is a book by a white woman called Robin DiAngelo, which is called White Fragility, which apparently is the book that everyone wants to read. It's essential. Matt Taibbi has some thoughts on it, an essay on Substack, a few thoughts on America's smash hit #1 guide to egghead racialism, a core principle of the academic movement that shot through elite schools in America since the early 90s, was the view that individual rights, humanism, and the democratic process are all just stalking horses for white supremacy. The concept, as articulated in books like former corporate consultant Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, reduces everything, even the smallest and most innocent human interactions, to racial power contests. Vibrancy, just gotta love it. It's been mind-boggling to watch White Fragility celebrated in recent weeks when it surged past a Hunger Games book on bestseller lists. USA Today cheered. I can't compete with that. Well, no, it stopped. USA Today cheered American readers are more interested in combating racism than in literary escapism. For how long, I wonder? When D'Angelo appeared on The Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon gushed, "I know everyone wants to talk to you right now." I don't think so. I don't think so. White fragility has been pitched as an uncontroversial roadmap for fighting racism at a time when, after the murder of George Floyd, Americans are suddenly and appropriately interested in doing just that. Except this isn't a straightforward book about examining one's own prejudices. Have the people hyping this impressively crazy book actually read it? D'Angelo isn't the first person to make a buck pushing the tricked-up pseudo-intellectual horse shit as corporate wisdom, but she might be the first to do it selling Hitlerian race theory. White fragility has a simple message. There is no such thing as an individual human experience, and we are defined not by our individual personalities or moral choices, but only by our racial category. If your category is white, bad news. White people, boo! You have no identity apart from your participation in white supremacy. Quote, anti-blackness is foundational to our very identities. Whiteness has always been predicated on blackness, which naturally means a positive white identity is an impossible goal. I'm just going to interrupt here to say, that I could see people making this argument with regard to America, but this same argument is being made in Britain, where essentially there were very few black people at all in Britain until the 1960s. I mean, in most places in Britain, you could spend your entire life without ever seeing a single black person, but that same argument that British society is somehow based on white supremacism is made there as well. D'Angelo instructs us there is nothing to be done here except strive to be less white. To deny this theory or to have the effrontery to sneak away from the tedium of her lecturing, what she describes as leaving the stress-inducing situation, is to affirm her conception of white supremacy. This is the intellectual equivalent of the ordeal by water. If you float, you're a witch. And it is orthodoxy across much of academia. D'Angelo's writing style is, were those gunshots? Is pure pain. The lexicon favored by intersectional theorists of this type is built around the same principles as Orwell's Newspeak. It banishes ambiguity, nuance, and feeling, and structures itself around sterile word pairs like racist and anti-racist, platform and deplatform, center and silence, that reduce all thinking to a series of binary choices. Ironically, Donald Trump says something similar, only with words like amazing and sad that are simultaneously more childish and livelier. Writers like D'Angelo like to make ugly verbs out of ugly nouns and ugly nouns out of ugly verbs. There are countless permutations on centering and privileging alone. In a world where only a few ideas are considered important, redundancy is encouraged, e.g., to be less white is to break with white silence and white solidarity, to stop privileging the comfort of white people, or Ruth Frankenberg, a premier white scholar in the field of whiteness, describes whiteness as multidimensional. Ron Unz said, this is an outstanding insight, that when you see this phrase, white supremacy, you could just replace it with magic or voodoo, and it would mean exactly the same thing. I mean, the argument here is that whiteness is really a superpower, that there's nothing that it can't accomplish. And as we saw with Elaine Liu, or Lainey Liu, the trash gossip monger and the social co-host, that when her own history of her homophobic, transphobic, misogynist, fat-shaming, whatever behavior was pointed out to her, she blamed white supremacy. Apparently, white supremacy is so powerful, it can turn Chinese people into white people. How about that? Matt Taibbi continues, D'Angelo writes like a person who was put in timeout as a child for speaking clearly. Quote, when there is disequilibrium in the habitus, when social cues are unfamiliar and or when they challenge our capital, we use strategies to regain our balance, unquote. Strategies. This word, used in a sense that means essentially nothing, has been around since at least the 1980s, because I used to work for a school board in BC, just outside Vancouver. And my computer project, was in a building that the teachers used for their professional development, or Pro-D days, as they call them, once a month. And they hear words like this. They hear speech like that of D'Angelo. And I was walking down the floor, the second floor, where these lecture sessions took place, and the room was emptying. And I saw this young librarian who I knew because I had installed one of these computer systems in her school. And she was gushing with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. I've just got to prioritize my teaching strategies. And I thought, what could that possibly mean? How many teaching strategies are there? And what would be the process in prioritizing one's teaching strategies? How would one go about this? Ideas that go through the English D'Angelo translator usually end up significantly altered, as in this key part of the book, when she addresses Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Quote, one line of King's speech in particular, that one day he might be judged by the content of his character and not the color of his skin, was seized upon by the white public because the words were seen to provide a simple and immediate solution to racial tensions. Pretend that we don't see race and racism will end. Colorblindness was now promoted as the remedy for racism, with white people insisting that they didn't see race, or if they did, that it had no meaning to them. Tabby comments that this speech was held up as the framework for American race relations for more than half a century, precisely because people of all races understood King to be referring to a difficult and beautiful long-term goal worth pursuing is discounted, of course. White fragility is based upon the idea that human beings are incapable of judging each other by the content of their character. And if people of different races think they are getting along or even loving one another, they probably need immediate anti-racism training. This is an important passage because rejection of King's dream of racial harmony, not even as a description of the obviously flawed present, but as the aspirational goal of a better future, has become a central tenet of this brand of anti-racist doctrine mainstream press outlets are rushing to embrace. Then he writes about Jackie Robinson. I don't want to talk about Jackie Robinson because I'm sick of hearing about how baseball was a worthless sport until Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Let's see. These ideas, D'Angelo's ideas, are taking America by storm. The movement that calls itself anti-racism, I think it deserves that name a lot less than pro-lifers deserve theirs. And amazed journalists parrot it without question, is complete in its pessimism about race relations. It sees the human being as locked into one of three categories: members of oppressed groups, allies, and white oppressors. Where we reside on the spectrum of righteousness is, they say, almost entirely determined by birth, a view probably shared by a lot of 4chan readers. With a full commitment to the program of psychological ablutions outlined in the book, one may strive for a less white identity, but again, D'Angelo explicitly rejects the Kingian goal of just trying to love one another as impossible for two people born with different skin colors. This dingbat racialist cult, which has no art, music, literature, and certainly no comedy, is the vision of progress in institutional America that America has chosen to endorse in the Trump era. Why? Maybe because it fits. It won't hurt the business model of the news media, which for decades now has been monetizing division and has known how to profit from moral panics and witch hunts since before Fleet Street discovered the mod rocker wars. Now, he talks about this incident, which in this book, which has been much talked about because it's ridiculous and hilarious, that D'Angelo makes a joke. Okay, always a serious mistake. She was forced to handle the fallout from making this bad joke while she was, quote, facilitating anti-racism training, unquote, at the office of one of her clients. When one employee responds negatively to the training, D'Angelo quips the person must have been put off by one of her black female team members. The white people, she says, were scared by Deborah's hair. And now you see white people are internalizing this absolutely berserk belief that white people are obsessed with black people's hair. D'Angelo doesn't grasp the joke flopped and has to be told 2 days later that one of her web developer clients was offended. In despair, she writes, I seek out a friend who is white and has a solid understanding of cross-racial dynamics. After D'Angelo confesses her feelings of embarrassment, shame, and guilt to the enlightened white cross-racial dynamics expert, everyone should have such a person on speed dial, she approaches the offended web developer. She asks, would you be willing to grant me the opportunity to repair the racism I perpetrated toward you in that meeting? At which point the web developer agrees, leading to a conversation establishing the parameters of problematic joke resolution. This dialogue, straight out of South Park, is it okay if I touch your penis? No, you may not touch my penis at this time, as a good shot of becoming standard at every transnational corporation, law firm, university, newsroom, etc., which I'm beginning to think is a very good thing, because it will destroy them. Yeah, this is a very long article. I will get to the end here. At a time of catastrophe and national despair, when conservative nationalism is on the rise and violent confrontation on the streets is becoming commonplace, it's extremely suspicious that the books politicians, the press, university administrators, and corporate consultants alike are asking us to read are urging us to put race even more at the center of identities and fetishize the unbridgeable nature of our differences. Meanwhile, books like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and To Kill a Mockingbird, which are both beautiful and actually anti-racist, have been banned for containing the N-word. White Fragility contains it too, by the way. It's almost like someone thinks there's a benefit to keeping people divided. Well, yeah, I guess the theme of today's show is black supremacy. How exactly that is going to work is an interesting question. I've talked on the show about the conquistador Americans who run Mexico, and they are roughly, 9% of the population, something like that. But the thing is that these people have always run Mexico, and black people in the United States have never run the United States, and they have shown little proclivity or success at running black majority cities, such as Detroit or Baltimore. I get the impression that the idea is there's going to be a bunch of black stooges acting for white big business, the white elite. Eventually, they'll figure out that they're being used as stooges. And given that we have to cower at everything they say, and given they have the potential for canceling people or worse, I'm looking forward to this happening, actually, because our elite are traitors. It's the only way to consider them. And they're playing a very dangerous game here. And I hope I will live long enough to see when they get their comeuppance. Let's talk about, can America survive? It was not that long ago, a year ago or so, that people were saying, slippery slope people were saying that they're going to be coming after monuments to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. And no, that is absolutely outrageous. I think you're being grossly irresponsible in saying such a thing. You notice these people never apologize? They never say, whoa, I didn't see that coming. I was wrong about that. I'm going to be a little more careful in the future about mocking such predictions. From the Daily Mail, rotting of the Big Apple, world-famous monument of George Washington is defaced as New York City slides billions into the red. Its police face $1 billion in cuts, and Mayor de Blasio is accused of surrendering the city to lawlessness. And familiar scene of a very handsome monument to George Washington in Washington Square Park in New York City has been splattered with red paint. Oh, and the American flag is flying at half-mast for some reason. There's a flag underneath it. Could it be the Black Lives Matter flag and then a rainbow flag underneath that? Oh, yes, and the very handsome arch at Washington Square Park, quite reminiscent of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Yeah. As I said before, I don't think that these people, it's not so much an attack on George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. The people doing this, they don't know anything about these people. What they are attacking is the past. And the fact that in America still, and maybe for not very much longer, the past is still denigrated. Even if the ideals of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington would seem absurd to people now, and I know that they do seem absurd, that when Timothy McVeigh was indicted by the federal government, part of the indictment, and you can check this out yourself if you don't believe me, was the fact that when he was arrested, he was found to be in possession of tracts by Samuel Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson had a very stern view on how to deal with tyranny. I'm not going to recite his famous statement about the Tree of Liberty because I fear it might lead to this live stream being canceled. Let's see. New York took a $9 billion hit when businesses shuttered at the start of the pandemic, and now many remain closed. Restaurant and retail traffic in New York City is currently 43.6% of the 2019 normal, whereas national traffic is at 53.2% of normal. New York Police Department Commissioner Dermot Shea said on Tuesday that he understood every department must face cuts, but that the decision had also been heavily influenced by the Black Lives Matter movement and that it was punitive. He insisted that his officers are not going to allow mob rule. I think that his officers are very much going to allow mob rule, that they're going to go on strike, or what they used to call in the trade union movement, work to rule. Why should these people risk their lives, their reputations, everything they have for a city that hates them, for a government that wants to punish them, that wants to hurt them? This is going to be the summer of murder in New York City, just a summer of murder in Chicago and various other places. And I guess they will learn what the consequences of anarchy are. Someone had asked a question in the chat. I'll answer it this way. If you're white and you live in St. Louis, leave. Leave now before it's too late. This is a story from the New York Post. The St. Louis lawyers who pulled weapons on protesters marching past their home are being investigated for possible criminal charges. Mark and Patricia McCloskey, who went viral after brandishing an AR-15 style rifle and a silver-colored handgun, respectively, were the only ones to lodge a police report over Sunday's confrontation, insisting they were victims of threatening trespassers who entered a gated community. They smashed the gate, is what they did. The police are not going to save you. They're not. Terrible things can be happening in your neighborhood. There can be an actual insurrection where dozens of businesses and hundreds or thousands of people were taken hostage in Seattle for several weeks, and the police did nothing. The husband and wife lawyers are being probed by police and prosecutors for possible threats against the crowd. St. Louis prosecutor Kimberly Gardner, who is a Black woman, said, "I'm alarmed at the events that occurred over the weekend where peaceful protesters were met by guns. We must protect the right to peacefully protest, and any attempt to chill it through intimidation or threat of deadly force will not be tolerated." She insisted, saying her office was currently working with the public and police to investigate these events. Let's make it clear, this was criminal trespassing that we're talking about. The mob was howling for blood, threatened to kill their dog. But no, this married couple who looked to defend themselves, they're clearly in the wrong, according to the prosecutor of the city of St. Louis, which tells me that the first step was defund the police, and the second step is abolish private property. Kimberly Gardner continued, "We must protect the right to peacefully protest. Make no mistake, we will not tolerate the use of force against those exercising their First Amendment rights, and we'll use the full power of Missouri law to hold people accountable." Was there any other occasion when people were attempting to exercise their First Amendment rights? Oh yes, protesting against COVID lockdowns. But anyone who participated in those protests was accused literally of being murderers. Mark McCloskey has insisted that they only grabbed their weapons after being threatened with their lives, comparing it to storming the Bastille. In their police report, the couple also claimed they only grabbed the weapons after they observed multiple subjects who were armed. Missouri law states that a citizen is committing unlawful use of a weapon if they exhibit, in the presence of one or more persons, any weapon readily capable of lethal use in an angry or threatening manner. It would likely be a Class D felony, punishable by up to 4 years in prison and a fine not to exceed $5,000. However, a so-called castle doctrine allows people to use deadly force to attack an intruder on their property. The couple's attorney, Albert S. Watkins, told the paper that the pair acted lawfully on their property. You know, I have some advice for the McCloskeys. I've seen their inside of their home. It is a palace. It is rather stunning. They clearly have a lot of money. If it becomes clear that they are going to be prosecuted for this, I would advise them to flee the country and making sure that they have taken their money out, moved it to a place where it cannot be seized, and move to a country where it is difficult, if not impossible, to be extradited back to the United States, because it is simply not possible that they will retrieve anything like a fair trial at the hands of prosecutor Kimberly Gardner. New book, sounds very interesting, by Ryan James Gurdusky and Harlan Hill, called "They're Not Listening: How the Elites Created the Nationalist Populist Revolution." Jake Bauer reviews it, and he says, "You need not be an astute political observer to know that 2016 was a seminal event in world history. In the United Kingdom, more than 17 million Britons voted to exit the European Union. The Brexit vote prevailed 52 to 48%. Then Americans elected Donald Trump, a bombastic real estate tycoon who vowed to build a border wall with Mexico, ban immigration from Muslim-majority countries, and end wars and quixotic nation-building exercises in the Middle East and Central Asia. As the authors show in their book, years of anger and the absolute refusal of global elites to listen to their working and middle-class citizens fomented those cataclysmic political events." They're Not Listening attempts to characterize nationalist populism and provide a historical overview of its global appeal. The author's political opinions changed when they realized that the Democrats were not the party of working people, but rather the party of woke white liberals in what author Michael Lind calls, in his book, The New Class War, America's hub cities. Think New York, Boston, Silicon Valley. Now the authors are trying to rally the Republican Party to the side of nationalist populism. What is nationalist populism exactly? They're Not Listening answers that question in each of its 9 chapters. On economics, nationalist populism is centrist. The ideology is supportive of protecting industries like manufacturing, mining, and logging, supports a welfare state that helps young families and seniors, and is skeptical of free trade and globalism. On national security and defense, nationalist populism rejects the neoconservative worldview that demands the United States invade the world, invite the world. Most important is curtailing immigration, legal and illegal, which takes up most of the book. Gurdusky and Hill show that Americans have voiced their opposition to mass immigration since the 1970s, but the ruling class elites in both parties have arrogantly refused to listen. Immigration is not just an American problem. Illegal Congolese immigration in Angola, the authors report, inspired Angolan voters to press for deportations. The refugee inundation of Europe, which began after ill-conceived military adventurism in Libya and Syria by the West, led to the rise of nationalist populist parties in the UK, Germany, France, the Netherlands, and even super-tolerant Sweden. Brazil and Chile have seen similar reactions too, even despite significantly smaller illegal immigrant populations. Yes, Chile decided in recent years. Chile, I suppose, is the most European of the South American countries. Argentina was right up there, but then they, in a fit of madness, decided to let Juan Perón run their country for some time, and Argentina has never recovered. But Chile's decided in recent years to import large numbers of Haitian immigrants, which I can only ascribe to a death wish. Now, this book was clearly written. I wonder about books in the future, books of this type. When things are changing as fast as they are now, isn't it kind of pointless to write a book which is to a large extent superseded by events even before it is published? When I mean superseded by events, what we've been told in the last few weeks is there's right views and wrong views. And you will have the right view. You will extol the right view. If you dare extol the wrong view, we will destroy you. Oh, and by the way, free speech means speech that we agree with. Oh, and by the way, democracy means results, electoral results that we agree with. If we do not agree with them, they are not democratic. Yes, this very long essay in the Quillette, which is the home journal of the so-called intellectual dark web. It's called The Great Awakening and the Second American Revolution by Eric Kaufman, who is the author of a book called White Shift, which I reviewed on the old book club on Luke Ford's show some months ago. Kaufman is, he's half Jewish and half Chinese, I believe. He is taking a really big picture look here. Statues toppled, buildings renamed, curricula decolonized, staff fired. The protests following George Floyd's killings have emboldened cultural revolutionaries in America and Europe. The iconoclasts are changing minds and could be in a position to enact a root and branch reconstruction of America into something completely unrecognizable to its present-day inhabitants. Imagine a country whose collective memory has been upended with a new constitution, anthem, and flag. Its name changed from the sinful America to something less tainted. Far-fetched, not according to data I have collected on what liberal white Americans actually believed. Only a renewed American cultural nationalism can resist it. Well, of course, I have got trouble with this paragraph because how can one have nationalism in something which is no longer a nation, or which is increasingly becoming no longer a nation? Kaufman, as expressed in White Shift, he seems to think that there's going to be a happy ending to whites becoming a minority in Western countries. Now, that is not a given. That is a result of policy, and policy can be changed, as Trump is changing America's immigration policy. Immigration has been slashed in the United States, but we've seen recent surveys indicating that among youth, the minorities are the majority, and we've already seen the results of this, which is shut up white people, especially shut up white women. Go away, hurry up, and die. This is our country now. Now, keep in mind that intersectionality will lead to the war of all against all, and it won't be too long before other minorities will get tired of having their own aspirations towards power subsumed under the rubric Black Lives Matter. Hispanics, Asians, I would think, East Indians in particular. This is all looking to become very ugly indeed, unless there is a reaction. Yes, terrible things are going to happen. I'm not going to make any predictions about how this is going to end up. But Kaufman writes, once harm, racism, and other concepts become unmoored from reality, more of the world is remade. Statues which were long ignored became offensive. Complex historical figures like Jefferson or Churchill, who embodied the prejudices of their time, or elites like Columbus or Ulysses Grant, whose achievements had both positive and negative effects, are viewed through a totalizing Maoist lens, which collapses shades of gray into black and white. If a historic personage transgressed left modernist sacred values, their positives instantly evaporate and activists myopically focus on their transgressions. Suddenly, an entire Orwellian world opens up. Place names, history books, statues, buildings. When you're equipped with the anti-racist hammer, everything begins to look like a nail. In this brave new world, it doesn't matter whether a symbol like the Rhodes Scholarship has acquired a completely different meaning or whether a statue has become a symbol of something completely different. All must be leveled to bring forth utopia. This is the Whig interpretation of history we're talking about here. It never occurs to these people who are pulling down statues or calling for statues to be pulled down that future generations might look askance at their views, at their actions. It's quite possible that in the future, people might be horrified by politicians who insisted, like Justin Trudeau does, for instance, and most of the Democratic Party, that abortion is a positive virtue. It's quite possible that in the future, people will be horrified, disgusted, outraged by the knowledge that people of our generation or the last few generations thought that it was a good idea to tell children about sexuality in great detail, to tell children as young as 5 years old about the minutiae of homosexual sexuality. They might be completely scandalized by that. Now, the same argument could be made, they were a product of their time. Well, the funny thing is we are all children of the zeitgeist. There's no getting away from it. And again, I look forward to living long enough such that the tables will be turned on these people. Kaufman asks, is there any way to resist the woke steamroller that's trying to iron out American distinctiveness? Yes, but this will require a concerted movement to protect the content of cultural nationhood. National identity can be understood in two registers, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative nationalism concerns the ascribed particularistic distinctiveness of a nation. Quantitative nationalism pertains to the achieved progress of the nation according to universal values like prosperity or equality. Since the 1940s, American nationhood has foregrounded universal values, but until recently, there had been room for the particularistic aspects of American culture. The concept of cultural nationalism refers principally to 19th century minority nationalists like the Welsh, Estonians, or Irish, who sought to unearth ancient chronicles and rework them into national histories, catalog folk traditions, and create written high languages out of spoken dialects. The key to such movements is a viable set of institutions that can protect and reproduce culture and identity. Sometimes they succeed, as with Israel's revival of Hebrew or Quebec's defense of French, and at other times they fail, as with the attempt to save the Provençal dialect from being replaced by Standard French in the 1950s, or the dream of a Gaelic-speaking Ireland. Again, I just don't see. I just don't see this kind of cultural nationalism that he's talking about when there is no agreement on anything at all in the United States. Not even Mark Twain was a great author. No, Mark Twain was a wicked, wicked man because he used the N-word. Oh, Preston Sturges, boy, one of the great American filmmakers, right? No, there are comical black people in his movies, and that makes him a wicked man. I remember writing about 20 years ago that when politicians talk about this unity, it bemuses me, because at that time, I described a situation where you have one house which is filled with lesbian witches, and next door you have a family where Harry Potter is considered to be the work of the devil, and it is not allowed in this house. And you can find many, many such examples and multiply them many, many times across America, across Canada for that matter. There is no unity at all. Even the founding of America itself, or the discovery of the New World, were those good things? Apparently not. Apparently not. Let's go back to the chat. Are you drinking, Jonathan? Tricky will ask of Jonathan Paul. Statue of Liberty is an idol. Yeah, I don't know. You can always find a way to come out against any of these things. And they'll find ways to come out against the Statue of Liberty. GSP says, in a way, part of me isn't so upset the statues of Enlightenment history are being torn down. As I pointed out before, and this is not original to me, the statues represent a world that has vanished, that has completely vanished. A world in which, just to give one example, which I mentioned earlier, that Thomas Jefferson's fierce opposition to tyranny, which he believed should be expressed, that it was just and meet that it be expressed in violence. Well, who believes in that? Who believes in that anymore? Violence? No. The state has a monopoly on violence, and anyone who suggests that citizens under tyranny should rise up against their oppressors is evil. Well, unless they're black, of course. Eternal Fisherman says even Italians are comparably conservative in Italy, but in the U.S. you have all these Nancy Pelosi's and Alyssa Milanos. I would say that the last two major European ethnic groups, not to be assimilated in Canada and the United States, were the Greeks and the Italians. But I would suspect, I don't know, as recently as a generation ago, I was given sort of a tour of the Italian community in Edmonton, and I could see that it was, noticeably different in its habits than the rest of the city. But I suspect that isn't true anymore. And of course, someone has an Italian last name. Well, how many non-Italians are in that lineage? I was speaking to a friend the other day about a fairly well-known rock guitarist. He also plays keyboards. His name is Nils Lofgren. He's back playing with Neil Young's band Crazy Horse. He had a band in the 70s called Grin, and then he had a solo career. His first album was really quite good. But his name is Nils Lofgren. And okay, that's kind of an echt Scandinavian name. And he is as runty a little Italian as one could imagine. He has a brother called Tom, and Tom looks like a Viking. And the reason for that is that Nils and Tom's father was Scandinavian and the mother was Italian. And of course, these sort of, Italian community, Irish community, German community, et cetera, that's pretty much all dissolved in the United States and in Canada as well. I mean, the Ukrainians in Alberta, they had a distinct society for decades, but when I lived there in the 90s, it was pretty much gone. All these rural Ukrainian churches are now deserted. Oh, let's see. Visionary Companion says Molyneux once did a rendition of blues tunes to illustrate the funky wonderfulness of the African Americans. Yes, this is right out of stuff white people like. And I must confess that many of those things in that book apply to me, such as, Michel Gondry, or listening to black music that black people don't listen to anymore. That mostly, soul stuff, from the 60s and 70s, Motown, Stax, etc. And black people have no interest in that at all. Not at all. Aegis says, what if Kevin got swatted during a stream? Okay, they're coming for you, KMG, says Jim Bowden. I don't really know how they could come for me. The sirens provide atmosphere. Goes well with the subject matter, says William Hicks. Very Edward R. Murrow-esque. Think of the times we're living through. You wear a helmet and a vest. Well, if I really wanted to get Edward R. Murrow-esque, I'd be smoking a cigarette, but as he always did. But that is not permitted in my apartment. Upper class neighborhood, KMG. Very funny. Very funny. It is not an upper class neighborhood. What's more annoying, Kevin? The sirens or the sunlight in your face? I can shift to avoid. Actually, it was explained to me yesterday, and all I need to do actually is to get a sheet to serve as a filter. So then I would be able to get the light without the ghastly film noir effect and not being blinded. No, the sirens are much worse. And the reason that you could hear the sirens as loud as you did is because, well, it's summer here now, and this room is not very big, and it becomes very hot indeed if I do not have the window open. Again, I sympathize with Sotomayor. That would be Tommy Sotomayor, I assume. But finding the base black is a vapid and sentimental exercise. Yeah, it's Thomas Sowell's 80th birthday today. And I've read many books by Thomas Sowell, and I've learned a great deal from them. But for years and years and years, you had conservatives, the true conservatives, Conservatism Inc., talk about black conservatives. And Thomas Sowell is 80. He's not going to be alive for much longer. Walter Williams, who's more of a libertarian than a conservative, he's an old man too. Where are these young black conservatives? There aren't any. There aren't any at all. Let's see. Philip Daniel says, late antique, medieval, early modern Arab Muslim considered both white Europeans and black Africans innately inferior to the medium complexioned Arab. Plenty of scholarship on this. I like the way in which Muslims in the United States, Arabs, oh, we're really black, Really? Is that what you think? Because I don't think that's what you think. And I'm well aware of the superiority complex that Arabs have towards others. But they're all getting on the BLM train. And I am looking forward to the derailment of that train. It's not going to be long. It's not going to be long because BLM was founded by 3 women, one of whom is transgender, and I think the other 2 are lesbians, or at least one of the other one is lesbian. This is as I said, black society is already matriarchal. And you see the replacement of heterosexual black men in the culture with homosexuals and drag queens. And just the potential for you. Well, you see the reaction in the Hotep movement, But I have to think that this is going to get much, much stronger. I mean, okay, who is the quintessential black man in the United States? RuPaul or Tyler Perry? I don't think Tyler Perry hasn't come out of the closet, but no, this is not going to end well. It is not going to end well. Let's see Joe Biden. Yeah, before we get into that, as virus surge grips red state, Biden steps up attack on Trump. Yeah, and they run a picture of him from early June at the Bethel American Methodist Ethiopian Church in Wilmington, Delaware. Biden has been in a basement in his home for weeks now, but they managed to find a picture of him, which is not appropriate, that he's stepping up his attacks on Trump's handling of the crisis. Again, the cognitive dissonance, again, the Schrodinger's cat. Donald Trump is a dictator, they said. He's something completely new in American history. Oh, maybe you should read about Lincoln and the Civil War. Maybe you should read about that. Maybe you should read about Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s, getting people like Father Coughlin kicked off the radio. The people who opposed America's entry into war find themselves charged with treason. Yeah, but Trump is something new. That was the old complaint against Trump. The new complaint is, why isn't Trump a dictator? Why isn't he simply taking control over these irresponsible Republican governors who have not locked down their states? Joe Biden is a terrible politician. You know, Trump, he takes it up with the White House press corps. He takes a lot of abuse from the White House press corps, but he gives as good as he gets. Biden just seems just a petty, nasty man. This is from the New York Post. Joe Biden upbraided Trump for his response to the coronavirus pandemic during a stump speech on Tuesday. A virtual stump speech from his basement, where he took questions from reporters for the first time since March and called one of them a, quote, lying dog face, unquote. Appearing before a giant American flag at a school. No, I stand corrected. He was at a school. Well, maybe it was a virtual school. I don't know. The former Veep accused Trump of squandering the 3 months since the virus first appeared and said the country was no better prepared than in March. It's almost July, and it seems our wartime president has surrendered, waved the white flag, and abandoned the battlefield. What the hell is he talking about? Seriously. Deaths have gone like this. Hospitalizations have gone like this. But the media is telling you exactly the opposite. The presumptive Democratic nominee outlined his plans for dealing with the pandemic as the nation experiences a troubling surge of new infections. It's not troubling at all. America is very close now to herd immunity. And the reason that the number of infections is spiking is because they are testing people who are asymptomatic, which didn't happen before. The gaffe-prone former lawmaker lashed out when one reporter mentioned his own mental deterioration at age 65 and asked Biden if he had been tested for cognitive decline. "You're a lying dog face," Biden said. Apparently irritated, the reporter kept asking questions as he tried to leave the event before adding that he was constantly tested. "All you got to do is watch me, and I can hardly wait to compare my cognitive capability to the cognitive capability of the man I'm running against," he said. That's hilarious. Trump does these pressers, and he answers question after question after question after question. Biden has been shielded from this for the longest time. Also, I'm looking at a picture of him attempting to smile, and it is a terrifying visage indeed. He talks about cognitive ability, Biden said. He doesn't seem to be cognitively aware of what's going on. He either reads and or gets briefed on important issues and he forgets it, or he doesn't think it's necessary that he needs to know it, Biden said. I wonder if that's what Biden really said. When I was a political reporter some decades ago, I had occasion, often to write about Jean Chrétien, who was Prime Minister of Canada at the time. And Jean Chrétien really couldn't speak English. Now, people said that he really couldn't speak French either. And after he began to be mocked for this, we were told, you can't mock him because he's handicapped. How was he handicapped? 3 different versions of how he was supposedly handicapped were trotted out. But no, lesson learned. Can't make fun of Jean Chrétien for looking and sounding like a thug. Jean Chrétien was so bad at English that I realized, to my amusement, that reporters no longer gave verbatim what he said because it didn't make any sense. They were paraphrasing him. And I noticed this because I would see, okay, Jean Chrétien speaks here, and I'd see 3 different news stories on it, and they would have 3 different versions of what he said. Now, I understand the reporter's problems, Chrétien was, what, in the 1993 election? It could have been. He was speaking at a Catholic high school in Ontario, of all places, and he just asked a question about abortion. And as far as I was able to figure out what he said, and no one else could seem to figure out what he said, his response was that abortion was not an issue for him any longer because his wife was too old such that he wouldn't need to force her to have one. That was the closest anyone could come. Dr. Fauci has become Dr. Doom. He warns COVID-19 cases could reach 100,000 a day. Yeah? And how many people are dying? How many people are dying? How many hospitalizations are there? Frank Burton, who follows me on Twitter, he tweeted, "I see COVID death cult is back in full swing. BLM now a distant memory. The zealots didn't manage to completely destroy the economy during the Great Panic round one. Second time's the charm. Gotta have to get those death numbers up ASAP. Fingers crossed." And you can see the deaths reaching a peak at about April the 23rd, and then falling. So they are now, deaths had reached something like 2.75K. And they are now down to something like 0.35K per day. That's a good news story, right? Frank Burton's tweet was in reaction to something that Joe Dunman had tweeted. Just shut everything down, suspend all mortgage and rent payments, give everybody $2K a month, regardless of employment or means, and call the rest of the year off. Otherwise, we're doomed. We knew this in April, but pretended we could just wish it away. My province of British Columbia, where there's 5.1 million people, there's been fewer than 175 deaths. And it was locked down, not as crazily as in other places, but yeah, let's just keep this going until there is no more economy. You see, the whole global warming, climate change, climate extinction, climate rebellion, it was a popular failure. The elite was totally locked into this. Nobody else really cared because this has been going on since the 1980s, and people look around and it doesn't seem to have changed much, the weather in my lifetime. Oh, yes, but an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Oh, that's significant, is it? We're all going to die? The Earth is going to be terraformed into Venus? This is a very significant story from CNBC. The employment population ratio, the number of employed people as a percentage of the U.S. adult population, plunged to 52.8% in May, meaning 47.2% of Americans are jobless. As the coronavirus-induced shutdown tore through the labor market, the share of population employed dropped sharply from a recent high of 61.2% in January, farther away from a post-war record of 64.7% in 2000, which was just before the dot-com bust. So yeah, misery. That is the result of the COVID-19 panic, and the Democrats and the media and the medical establishment wants more misery for various reasons. One, it makes them feel important, and two, it's going to defeat Donald Trump. That's the plan. Toby Young writes on Lockdown Skeptics, well, Boris Johnson lost his head in Britain, and I guess his government is just completely at a loss as to how to get out of this self-initiated crisis. He writes, "What on earth does the government think it's doing? What possible reason is there for reimposing a full lockdown on Leicester?" In an act of sheer lunacy, Matt Hancock announced this morning that non-essential shops have been told to close today and schools asked to shut their doors to the majority of children from Thursday. Pubs, restaurants, and hair salons had been gearing up to reopen on Saturday, have now been told to remain closed. The rationale, needless to say, is that Leicester has seen a surge in cases with over 900 new cases in the past 2 weeks. Confusion surrounded this figure since the published data for Leicester recorded just 80 new positive tests between June 13th and 26th, but Hancock now says there were in fact 944. How do we know the increase in cases is simply an artifact of increased testing in Leicester? We don't. Obviously. Is it really worth reimposing a lockdown on Leicester to prevent one person a week from dying? I looked at the NHS England data for hospital deaths, and of the 5 people who died from coronavirus on June 29th, 4 were more than 80 years old. So the people of Leicester are being asked to close schools, shut non-essential shops, and keep their pubs, restaurants, and hair salons shuttered for 2 more weeks in order to prevent the deaths of 2 people aged 80 plus. And yeah, that's not taking into account the cancer operations being postponed, the increased risk of suicide and domestic violence, and elderly people who may die of thirst or starvation because their relatives aren't allowed to visit them. There's a good piece in Hector Drummond magazine entitled, "This is what we shot ourselves in the foot for." He has plotted the ONS's figures for all-cause mortality in England and Wales dating back to 1900 on a graph, and it shows a pretty modest uptick in 2020. For graphing purposes, he assumes that the number will be the 5-year average for 2015 to 19. Yes, ONS now says all-cause deaths are now below the 5-year average. Now, we're going to get the tautological explanations from the experts saying that it was the lockdown that did it. But again, in most places, people were allowed to go to grocery stores and liquor stores and drugstores and other places where social distancing could not be enforced. Also, the line at that time was that masks are unnecessary and their efficacy had not been proved. But this is rather similar to saying that the strength of the Soviet economy, or the economy that beat Hitler, this was due to the the forced starvation of the 20s and 30s, that it made Russia more efficient, or that the reason that the Russian army was able to beat Hitler was because of the mass purge and mass murder of army officers under Stalin. There's nothing that cannot be explained in this tautological way. The rate of decline is flattening. Oh no! Amusing comment in The Guardian on this graph just released by Downing Street showing the daily declining death tolls. Downing Street has updated its daily dashboard with the latest coronavirus figures. These are US figures. Here's the graph showing the number of daily deaths. It is still going down, but now the rate of decline is flattening. Well, yes, the rate of decline is flattening. That's what happens when the number approaches 0. When it actually gets to 0 next week, perhaps, expect The Guardian to run a story saying rate of decline in COVID-19 deaths worryingly flat. Because, the media in Britain mostly hates Boris Johnson, and he has done a terrible job. But it is really amazing to see the elite of our society, led by the medical establishment, actually cheering on apocalypse and, scaring people to death along the way. We hear a lot of this word reckoning. I hope that we're going to have a real reckoning with regard to this. Now, Alex Berenson, he writes, wondering what's really happening in Texas. Here's the email from a senior executive at a Texas ER chain that sees thousands of patients a month. He went on the record, a brave move. I'm going to let him speak for himself. 2 tweets of screenshots. I am the managing, J.B. Nyman. I am the managing partner and general counsel of a Texas-based company that owns and operates 13 freestanding emergency clinics in the state of Texas. I follow your reporting, and I wanted to share with you some information on Texas. I want people to hear this story as opposed to the mainstream reporting. However, I am sensitive about putting a target on myself or my company for conveying this information. I'm not sure how you've handled this type of situation, but I suspect you have had other people send you information who are concerned about becoming a target. In June, we tested over 2,231 patients, data through last Thursday. The positive rate is now close to 20%. as of last Thursday. It was 4.4 to 6% positive in May. Vast majority of the cases are mild to very mild symptoms. Average age of the people getting tested is mid-30s. Very different patients in terms of age that we've seen before June. Most of these patients would not have met the strict criteria that we previously had and all health facilities had for COVID testing. Now, with more testing kits, we're able to test a broader group of patients. Clinically, we've had very few hospital transfers because of COVID. Vast majority of the patients are better within 2 to 3 days of the visit, and most would be described as having a cold, a mild one at that, or the symptoms related to allergies. We've often provided a steroid shot and some antibiotics. By the time we have follow-up calls, most of the patients are no longer experiencing any symptoms. They often say the shot really made a difference. In terms of what's driving them to the emergency room, roughly 1/2 have been told by their employers to get a test. They have a sneeze or a cough, and their employer tells them to go home and get tested. The other half just want to know. They have mild symptoms, and some don't have any symptoms, but game the system and check a box that they have a symptom so they can get a test. They cannot get a test unless they present with symptoms. If they have no symptoms, we send them away, which does happen. In terms of information from within hospital systems, the average length of stay of COVID patients is 3 to 5 days, much lower than the patients being seen in April and early May. Their symptoms are also milder. Most of these patients are not ending up in the intensive care unit. The hospital ICUs are filled with really sick people with non-COVID issues. They didn't come in earlier because they were scared, and now they are super sick. From multiple sources at different hospitals, they have plenty of capacity and no shortage of acute care beds. No real data on breakdown of patients who have COVID but are not in the hospital because of COVID. Recognition that because all patients are tested for COVID, you have some percentage of patients listed as COVID patients who are non-COVID symptomatic, and that the hospitalization rate is somewhat driven by hospitals taking in their normal patients with other medical issues. Finally, heard several stories of how discharge planners are being pressured to put COVID as primary diagnosis, as that pays significantly better. Hospitals want to avoid the discussion, but if they don't, they risk another shutdown. There may be an explanation for why there is a gap in hospital executives saying they have plenty of capacity and the increasing number of COVID hospitalizations. You open up your hospitals for normal medical care and you test every one of those patients. The result is a higher percentage of patients who have COVID. Now, I saw elsewhere that the Centers for Disease Control is constantly adding to the number of symptoms which are now associated with COVID. That's exactly what they did with AIDS. This is yet another example of how COVID is AIDS. The AIDS panic was like a test run for the COVID-19 panic. That why would you, with a simple test, can show whether you had COVID-19? Why are they continually adding to the list of symptoms? So they can juice the numbers, so that they can have what are called epidemiologically linked cases of COVID. That is to say, there is no test that proves that they are positive, but they get to add those to the numbers. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, testified Tuesday that an emerging virus found in pigs in China shares traits with the 2009 swine flu and 1918 pandemic flu, and U.S. public health officials are monitoring the disease. Why do we have any contact with China at all? Why is that allowed? It seems to be not safe. Not safe. Let's see, there are 3 things we have to do to get people wearing masks, writes Angela Duckworth, Lyle Unger, and Ezekiel J. Emanuel in the New York Times. They are professors at the University of Pennsylvania. Persuasion works better than compulsion. Hong Kong has so far reported a grand total of 4 coronavirus deaths, while New York City has reported over 20,000. I thought at this point I would just stop reading this story, because if you seriously believe that there were 4 COVID-19 deaths in Hong Kong, then you are so gullible. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Intelligent people do not trust any figures whatsoever, that come out of China. The article concludes with the story of face masks in this country is still being written. We may lack the wisdom Hong Kong earned weathering prior epidemics, but it's not too late to apply 3 basic principles from behavioral science. Make it easy, understood, and expected, and we'll soon see face masks everywhere saving lives. Well, as I pointed out many times, there is no medical consensus whatsoever that the use of face masks is efficacious in this regard. There isn't. There simply isn't. And at a time when the number of deaths, as Toby Young points out, in Britain is approaching 0, now is the time when we're all being bullied to wear masks because they don't want to let up on the bullying. And oh my God, it looks like Trump may weasel his way out of this. An amusing story. I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh, but one looks for as many laughs as one can, given the circumstances. A Nickelodeon teen actor has shared a video of herself extremely distressed after discovering her face mask had been pierced into her ear, along with an earring by a technician. Sissy Sheridan, 16, who appears on Nickelodeon's web series DIY with Me and has 3 million TikTok followers, shared the video of herself crying to the platform as she realized her mask had been pierced into her ear. The actress had been to an Icing by Claire's store near her home in Sterling, Virginia, to have a 3rd ear piercing put in each lobe on Monday, accompanied by her mother and a close friend, she told BuzzFeed News. After getting into the car to travel home and attempting to remove her mask, the 16-year-old realized it was stuck and claimed that it had been accidentally pierced through the ear along with the new earring. And there are TikTok stills here of her looking, well, hysterical. With no choice but to leave the mask hanging from her ear, Miss Sheridan wore the mask home, where her mother, Lisa, helped cut most of it free by folding her ears forward. In the video, a hysterically crying Miss Sheridan can be heard saying, "I just got my ears pierced and she pierced it on my mask. I can't get it off and it hurts so bad. I hate Claire's. Look at the white one. It's stuck in my ear. And they look so ugly. I just want to take them out. Look at it. She pierced it on my mask." Interestingly enough, Sissy seemed just fine in a video taken inside the store in the moments the piercing was made. Okay. All right. Oh, apparently are we going to get baseball? A 60-game season? It's almost July. Baseball's supposed to start at the end of March or the beginning of April. Apparently the Blue Jays players have been summoned to Toronto. Are they going to really play in the Rogers Centre empty? Are they really going to do that? But according to CNN, several baseball players are opting out of the 2020 MLB season. Why? Various reasons. Washington Nationals infielder Ryan Zimmerman and pitcher Joe Ross will not be playing the 2020 season. Arizona Diamondbacks right-handed pitcher Mike Leake has also decided not to play the season. Monday night, Colorado Rockies outfielder Ian Desmond posted an emotional message on Instagram stating that he will also be opting out of playing this season. The 34-year-old, who is biracial, made reference to the ongoing racial tensions in the country and the pandemic as why his family needs him at home. The COVID-19 pandemic has made this baseball season one that is a risk I'm not comfortable taking, with a pregnant wife and 4 young children who have lots of questions about what's going on in the world. Home is where I need to be right now. Home for my wife, Chelsea. Home to help, home to guide, home to answer my 3 older boys' questions about coronavirus and civil rights and life. Home to be their dad. This seems more like a BLM protest than a coronavirus fear. What do the fans will make of this desertion? Desmond is 35 years old. He has virtually zero risk of suffering anything, even if he contracts coronavirus. Okay, I was going to talk about Brian Mulroney, who was Prime Minister of Canada from 1984 to 1993, arguably the worst prime minister in Canada's history. Oh, and it gets better. Well, I'll talk about this tomorrow. Mulroney wants to double Canada's population and more free trade. Oh, and universal basic income. It's an absolute nightmare plan. The media seems to be keen on it. But it gets better. Brian Mulroney is calling for an immediate and urgent rethink of Canada-China relations and is praising Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for rejecting domestic demands to free senior Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. I have to be very careful what I say about Brian Mulroney because of Canada's strict libel laws and what I know about Brian Mulroney, the full extent of it. You'll have to wait to when he dies, assuming that he dies before I do. Oh, finally, I'll just mention someone sent this to me and wanted it highlighted, so I will highlight it. Ontario Liberals change rules, lower fees to ensure more female candidates. This is from the Globe and Mail 2 days ago. They have a new leader. His name is Stephen Del Duca. And this sort of stuff would be illegal. It's supposed to be illegal under our Charter of Rights, but our Charter of Rights is a joke because Section 15.2 explicitly protects racial discrimination against, well, white people, in particular, white men. Let's see. Part of the strategy is to become the most open and equitable party in Canada, says a backgrounder, which 92% of the party's executive team and riding presidents approved in a vote Sunday. To do so, the party will lower registration fees for female candidates by 50%, so that women will pay $1,250 instead of $2,500 for men. Candidates under the age of 30 will pay only $500, because that's what you're looking for in leadership. You're looking for callow people. Can't get enough of those callow people. But just a reminder, when anyone in Canada talks about equality and Canada is based on equality, tell them to their face that they are liars, that they are despicable liars, because Canada is explicitly based, as expressed by our so-called, our amusingly named Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is based explicitly on inequality. So I'm going to save the I wanted to devote a significant amount of time to Brian Mulroney's horrific plan. I'll talk about that tomorrow. Let's see. I'll take a last look at the chat here. Chogokin666 loved when the CHOP cheerleaders discovered they executed 2 unarmed black children. Were we told a week ago that CHOP was over? Now, the barricades were taken away, but new barricades were placed there. Yes, STFU James N says the best noise canceling curtains are in the pricey zip codes. Indeed. Indeed. Jonathan Pohl says D'Angelo is a Sicilian name. I don't know. Aljai says I'm just taking the Mickey. That's Cockney rhyming slang. Mickey Bliss equals piss. The Ruder version is I'm taking the piss. YT says, yeah, in my profession, it's now all about strategies. Total marketing BS for the stupid age. The soul of it and ability to think are gone. I just don't. How do people put up with this stuff? You know, years ago, when I was working in radio in Vancouver, well, the fellow who had hired me, he quit. I stayed on as a producer. And so the station manager, the one who had hired my boss, was fired. So a new broom was brought in. And so I and the other producer that I supervised and my sister, who was the operator on the show, fiddling with the faders and such like. You know, in Fraser, they called Roz a producer. She wasn't a producer. She was just an operator. Oh, and by the way, operators, they make very little money. They certainly don't make enough money to have that nice pad that Roz had in Seattle. But anyway, so we're called into a meeting about, the new host that was hired, and what kind of show it was going to be. And the new general manager, his name was George Madden, and I will mention him by name because his first act as general manager was to assemble the entire staff in the boardroom and then botch a fake firing. Yeah, he intended to fake fire everyone. Just a delightful, delightful experience. Anyway, he kept talking about contests and promotions and the like. Those work on music stations. They do not work on talk radio stations. The only kind of promotions which are useful, and these are for fans, swag. Man, people love the swag. I mean, coffee mugs with the name of the show on it. I've constantly had people calling up begging for these things. I once gave a guy a bunch of mugs, and he owned a bar, and he started giving me free food and drink because I'd given him some branded mugs. But anyway, I'm just listening to the station manager keep going on about contests and promotions, and I'm thinking, this is a really stupid idea, but I want to keep my job. So I was going, yes, George, we're definitely going to have to consider that. Yeah, good suggestion, all the way through. And at the end of the interview, after George has left, my sister pulled me aside and said, why didn't you just yell at George about what an idiot he was? And I said, what are you talking about? I was nodding my head and saying, yes, good idea. And she said, your eyes rolled back in your skull. And I thought, oh, great. Apparently, I can't control my eyes. My eyes are going to give me away. And the reason I mentioned this is when you have these diversity meetings, the inclusion meetings, the strategy meetings, all the buzz talk word meetings, what about the people like me who try as best they cannot disguise what they really think about this? Are people going to be disciplined, for involuntary acts, like their eyes rolling back in their heads? Josh Randall, I'm going to cut and paste that question for KMG. What is the question? I wonder. What is the question? Let's see. Would you quit a job if they started anti-racism training? I suppose it depends on my circumstances. I put up with a lot in employment when I had 3 children and their mother to look after. Obviously that hasn't been the position for quite some time. Edward Richardson says, prioritizing my teaching strategy sounds like the hollow corporate speak of the character in Fight Club who robotically wonders, am I exploiting my core competencies? This language creeps in and everyone takes it for granted. Like this militaristic language referring to a committee as a task force. I mean, this must have been kind of shocking at the time, right? That using this militaristic language, particularly to veterans, it's a committee. It's not a task force. But we're all used to it. We're all used to it now. Let's see, what else? We're coming near to the end here. I don't have a parlay account, says Philip Daniel. GSP says 47% of the BLM protesters across the country were white. America is in a dramatic decline. Well, remember those figures I told you about how few Americans are actually working? And keep in mind that many of these people were cooped up in their houses or apartments for months and terrorized that, if you step outside, you're going to die. So I think that we can ascribe a fair amount of this BLM madness to those circumstances. Jonathan Pohl said, I applied for a job in St. Louis yesterday. Oh, yes. Yeah, the city where you're going to be prosecuted for defending yourself from a howling mob. On the other hand, if you've seen the pictures of where those lawyers live, it's sumptuous, but it's good taste sumptuous. It's not, it's not Trumpian. It's just a very enviable place to live. GSP predicts Russian constitutional referendum will go through. No government dual citizenship, God, and no gay marriage. Yeah, I saw a parody video. You may have seen it, produced by Putin's opponents, where the man has to have a mandatory sex change operation and the like because God wasn't included in the Constitution. It was kind of funny, actually, I have to say. Ernest Hemingway versus Jack London. Jack London, no question about it. I find Ernest Hemingway's macho posturing to be irritating in the extreme. I rather like Jack London, on the other hand. Remember Chilling with Hemingway in Paris? There was a Canadian author called Morley Callahan, and he was fairly popular in Canada for decades, but it seemed the basis of his fame is that he'd spent something like 6 months in Paris with Hemingway, and they had, duked it out. Also, Hemingway is a person. No, I don't want to hit you in the face, okay? No, don't make me hit you in the face. What's wrong with this guy? How come he has to, exchange shots with everybody that he knows? Okay. Let's see. That's it. That's it for the show. I've gone a little over. Thank you all for listening and or viewing. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, at 7 p.m. Eastern. Coming up later in the week on July the 2nd, Theater Thursday, The Lives of Others, movie about the DDR. I know that's not how the letters are pronounced. The Deutsches Demokratische Republik, by Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck from 2006, highly acclaimed. And on the book club, A Book of Moral Philosophy, After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre. That's on Friday. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you've not done already. If you would like to contribute to this show, which is greatly appreciated now more than ever, my PayPal account is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And I will leave you with this. In these days of social isolation and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to find a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.